Hey friends, welcome back to the CNC Auto channel. Your friendly neighborhood mechanic here. And today it's all about the square body. Here she is. Like I said, she's coming to the shop with a problem. She's leaking a little bit of coolant. We're going to take a look at that. But while I had it here, I wanted to take the opportunity to show you guys around a typical square body truck like what you can find today and show you some of the problem areas that you need to watch out for when you're evaluating one of these or you're inspecting one of these as a potential project. When you guys finish watching this video, you'll be the expert on square bodies. Heck, you'll probably know more about a square body than one of your buddies who has one. And I'll bet you can point out something on his truck that he didn't even know about. I think you're going to find this to be the most definitive, most in-depth, detailed square body video out there. And I hope that you guys share it with your friends, save it for later, go back through it when you're going through your own project. Do me a favor, right now, hit that subscribe button. Man, that really helps a lot. It's not going to sign you guys up for spam or anything like that. All it does is it lets YouTube know that you appreciate the kind of videos that we're making. And also it helps them to put it in front of more people so that we can, more importantly, help a larger audience. I'll bet you're like me and you don't just want to know where to look for problems, but why those areas have problems as well. So I took a lot of time and effort to show you behind the scenes of these body panels, up underneath the truck, back in those nooks and crannies, and talk about why those areas are prone to rust and corrosion. I did not start out to make this video this long, but once I got started and we started to see how many things there were to talk about on one of these square bodies, I couldn't stop. And I know that that's a lot to look at. So I put some chapter slides in between each section. So if there's a certain part of the truck that you're interested in, say the hood or maybe the fender or a cab corner, go ahead and just slide right through the video until you get to that chapter. There's a lot of you guys out there that are a whole lot more knowledgeable about this sort of thing than I am. So leave some comments down below. Talk about what we might have missed. Talk about other issues that you've found. Remember, this community is here to help one another. None of us is as smart as all of us. So leave some comments. You never know who you might help. All right, enough gabbing. Let's go look at this square body. Starting here in the front, you can see that this is a pretty straight truck. Straight meaning that it hasn't apparently been into any accidents. Doesn't seem to have a bunch of big dents on it. And so let's go around this thing and take a look, a little closer look, and see if we can spot any problem areas. So if you've seen our video that we showed the F100, 1967 F100, you'll remember that one of the first things we want to do is come and look down the side of the vehicle for straightness. But you see this body line right here? Man, that's a great way to look down the side of that vehicle. If you can see how that body line lines up as we come down the side of the truck there, really gives away the quality of the fitment of the body panels. And we'll show you if there's been any accidents. Let's look on this other side real quick. This one might show up a little bit better because of the sun reflecting off of it. You see that body line that I'm talking about right there? Follow that down the side of the truck. You see the back of the door, how that's just sagging just a little bit? When you see that, you want to look real close at that door, especially the hinges, and make sure that there's nothing going on there. While we're looking at body lines, don't forget to look at this line of where the bumper comes up towards the body of the vehicle. See that gap over on this side? Oh, it's about, I don't know, 1.5 inches, maybe 2 inches. If we look over towards the other side of the vehicle, that gap widens out. And on this side, maybe 2.5 inches. So that might be an indicator that you need to look and see if this side that's closer to the vehicle got pushed in potentially by a little bump up against something. And we're going to look really closely at those frame horns, the front part of the frame on both the front and the back side of the vehicle, for any evidence of buckling, bending, rust, corrosion. You want to make sure that that foundation is strong. So we see that the back of the door is sagging just a little bit. So let's go ahead and take a look inside and see what's going on with it. All right, opens pretty nicely. One of the things you can do is pick up on this end of the door here. I'm holding on here. You can grab down here at the bottom as well. Pick up on it and see if it's got any play in the hinges. If those hinges have any play in them, it may be that hinge right back in here. There's a pin in the middle of this hinge. Hopefully you can see it back here where my fingers point. There's a pin that runs from the top. There's the top of that pin down through there. A lot of times those will have some play in them and allow that door to kind of wobble along on this hinge like this, and so it'll sag sometimes. This one is pretty tight. The other thing you want to look at is here where the hinge mounts to the body of the truck. Make sure that there's no rot and corrosion in there. That would be an indicator that this A-pillar has some foundational issues. Also, as I discussed on that other truck, you want to look at where the top of the door is, looking for rust and corrosion up here, and especially down here on the bottoms of these doors. Let me see if I can get that in focus for you. See these little weep holes? Any water that comes into these doors should come and drain out of those weep holes, but a lot of times trash will come in here and clog these holes, and then that water can pool up behind there and soak whatever trash is back in there and cause these to rust out. This one doesn't have that problem, so this door is looking really good. While we have that door open, let's take the time to look at this rocker panel. A lot of times these are also an area for a lot of rust. We got just a little spot right there. Nothing terribly bad. Little rust through spot, but that's not bad at all. Again, this is an area behind which you can get a lot of corrosion. If we come back here to this cab corner, remember those are notorious, and you can really see right in here, and get you in focus there, you can really see right in here how this area can collect a lot of trash and debris and get wet, and just like this, it's going to cause that rot out. But don't worry, all these parts, whether it's the cab corner, the rocker panel, the bottom of these doors, all of those are available in the aftermarket, and you can get replacement pieces to cut out the old and put in the new. Also, while we have this door open, we're going to check right down in here where the floorboard comes and meets that rocker. You see how this area comes down? You can imagine that if any water was to get in here around the windshield, it would come drip down, run down the inside of this A-pillar, come down to this area, and then settle down in this corner. So we're going to come in here. There's a lot of trash in here, as you're going to find in just about any old car that you evaluate. You're going to want to try to pull back that carpet. You can see that this carpet has some jute padding underneath it. If you can, get underneath that jute padding and look at the floorboard. See if I can put you in focus. What you're looking for is on this floorboard, is there a lot of rust and rot right here. If you see a little bit of corrosion, a little bit of rust, that's where your poker comes in. You want to poke around in here and make sure that that's solid. Another area that I wanted to show you guys to look at on your potential square body project truck for rust and corrosion is here below the seat where this hump starts to come down and meets the rocker panel. This one's got this little plastic piece here, so I went ahead and took the screws out of it. Let's go ahead and look underneath here. I'll show you what to look for. So this is where the carpet comes down. Also an opportunity to look under there for that corrosion in that corner I talked about, and down in this channel where the wires are running. You can lift up the carpet a little bit here. Let's see if we can see under there. This one's really clean, but you can tell that there's a channel down here, and that channel right in there behind this part of the where the body panels come together can collect water and corrosion, water and some debris, and cause a lot of corrosion. And of course that will spill over and start to rot out this rocker panel. We don't have that issue with this truck, but I wanted to show you this is a place you want to look real close as well, because that oftentimes has a lot of rust in there. Up here in the corner of the windshield, we've got an area that likes to collect debris again, and if that gets moist, it could cause some corrosion and rust. So again, clean that out as much as you can. Take your little poker, test in there, and make sure that that's not rusty. Sometimes you can stand on the outside and look through the windshield and see this area a little better than from inside the vehicle, so try that as well. Outside on the cowl, right in front of the windshield, you want to look down in between these body panels and where this cowl bolts on. You want to make sure that that's not rusty. As you can tell, this is an area again where a lot of debris can pile up, and if that stays wet, it'll rust out down inside of there. Okay, now here we are, front fenders. Just eyeballing the outside of this front fender. What you're looking for down here behind the front wheel, especially down as it comes down to that pinch weld. This one's dented. It looks like they must have run over something. But you're looking for rust and corrosion down on the outside. It'll show up as bubbles if it's just starting, bubbles under the paint, blistered looking. It'll also have holes ultimately through that outer skin. And I'll get back there behind there and show you why this area, and also right in front of the wheel, the same lower part in front of the wheel, are notorious for rusting. Sometimes over the wheel arch as well, so look there especially close. If you can, look even behind, and we'll get back there and show you that next. We're back here behind the front wheel now, and remember how this fender is bent down, dented out of the way? Well, actually that's come into our advantage, because now we can look in behind that inner and outer fender metal. You see there's an outer one that's bent here, and there's an inner one that is right along here, and you can see that right behind there is a gap, and that gap can get full of debris. There's a little bit of stuff in there, but nothing that bad. And when that happens and it captures moisture, that's when you get this bottom of the fender behind the front wheels rotted out. Real important that you guys look right in there and make sure that that's not a problem area. Also, if it was a problem area in the past and someone fixed it, a lot of times you'll be able to look back in here and see the body putty or chicken wire or newspaper or whatever, so if somebody might have stuffed in there to supposedly fix that issue. Here we are in front of the front wheel, and I want you to notice something. You see where we got these two sheets of metal, one on the inner and one on the outer portion of this fender. They come together in front of and behind the wheel, and that area between those two pieces of metal, just like here, will get a lot of debris caught in it. And if that area gets debris caught in it and it stays wet, it'll rot out, causing a lot of rust and corrosion, especially right along these lower portions of the fenders. So watch for that. I wanted to show you guys that there's a way to look back behind the top of the front wheels on these old square bodies, and that is to pop the hood and go, and there are these access panels back behind. Let me take you back behind here. See if we can look down in there. Okay, there we go. You see that is the gap between the inner and the outer front fenders, and you can see there's a little bit of trash starting to collect down in there. But this is an area to look at really closely to make sure that it hasn't been collecting debris and rotting out. This is a unmolested, honest example because it has not been repainted. But if you're looking at a truck that's been repainted, make sure that you take your magnet to those areas that we talked about are notorious for rusting through, and just make sure that it sticks very nice and easy. If it's got a lot of body putty, it'll be kind of like this plastic trim here. It's so thick that the magnet doesn't want to stick to it. That magnet will either slide down or just fall off like it's doing here. Right behind the front wheels on these old square bodies is the inner fender liner, and the original ones have this stiffening plate right through here. That stiffening plate is just extra meat, extra metal that the manufacturer put on here to help this to stay sturdy in place. That it looks kind of like an access plate, like you could take these bolts off and remove that, but this is welded onto the inner fender liner. But this, because all that trash is getting thrown up back here behind this tire in this area, and again, you got two pieces of metal that are real close to one another, as you can tell, these really are prone to rust and corrosion, and this one is no exception. The aftermarket again supports this very well, and so you can get new inner fender liners, but interestingly, the new inner fender liners don't have this beefy section here to bolt to. They're just one piece stamped steel. Continuing back along the bottom of the truck on the outside, looking at the body panels, here we are to the back wheel. This area right in here, another area where a lot of debris can get trapped behind it and cause rot. Let's go back there and take a look at why that is. All right, here's the back side of that area. I'll put you in focus real quick. See, there we go. And you can see how right here by the back wheel, it's going to throw a lot of stuff up here. A lot of times mud will get caked in right here. And again, that mud or any kind of debris that can sit on this metal for a while, especially moist, will cause it to rust. This is the wheel arch over the rear wheel. And look at this. This is great. We can really see those panels here. So you've got an outer skin to these fenders and an inner skin right there. You see that gap between the two? Look how that gap goes up and over the top of the wheel. Now, the manufacturer later started putting these little weep holes there to allow any moisture that gets back behind those two to come out. But if those get clogged, then that area over the wheel is going to rust out for sure. This one doesn't have that issue, but look real close and feel back here if you're not going to crawl under the vehicle, and make sure that that area is clear. We'll go ahead and follow this wheel arch all the way around to the back side of the rear wheels. And look at here. See how we got that outer skin and this inner skin, and they come together, but they leave a gap back behind it. And that gap back behind it is especially bad for collecting debris. And right in there, it'll sit. Moisture, debris will sit and cause rust, especially on this outer panel. And so you'll see that when you come back here behind the wheel, you'll see that as rust right in this area. Real bad on these old square bodies. Coming around to the other side, you can see right off, there's a problem. Remember what I was showing you on the other side, those two panels, the outer skin of this fender and the inner skin come together right through there. And sure enough, on this one, a lot of corrosion has occurred, a lot of rust and rot has come through here because of the trash that sat behind there. Let's go see if we can see if there's still any stuck in there. Let's look back behind this fender. Oh yeah, look at in there. There's that gap between those two panels, and sure enough, all kinds of stuff is squirreled away inside of there, causing that rust and corrosion. So make sure you check these places on your potential square body project. All right, let's work our way around to the back of the truck. Okay, we're just looking at the lines first. You can see the body line right there looks nice and straight across the top of that tailgate. The trim is all here. Lights are there. That line, that body line between the bumper and the bottom of the tailgate looks pretty straight. Those are good indicators that this truck hasn't been in a wreck from behind. Now, look at this on that bumper. See, this has got an aftermarket chrome bumper, but right in there you can see some rust, and we'll crawl back in behind there and make sure that that's not a problem that goes any deeper than that bumper. This is such an honest example of one of these square body trucks for us to look at, because just like a lot of what you're going to find, it may be sitting somewhere and have some stuff collecting in the back of it. So I wanted to show you some problem areas to look at on these old square bodies for potential rot. And sure enough, here we can see these areas that collect debris and moisture over time. Those are the areas you want to go and make sure they're not too rusted out. Moving up here to the front of the bed, down in this corner, there's a little drain hole, and that'll get clogged up very easily, and all this debris will collect moisture and sit here and rot out this corner. Same thing in front of this wheel hump, wheel arch. Another area, as you can see, collects corrosion. Check that for the rot and rust through. These old trucks were used for a purpose back in the day, and so it's not very uncommon to find that the tailgate and or the bed floor have some dents and some dings in them. Maybe even if they really use these tailgates hard, you might look down it this way and see that it's got a bit of a bow to it, a little sag there in the middle. You want to have that in mind when you're planning out your project. You see there's some dents in here. Again, all of these things can be fixed. Main thing is you don't want to see too much rust holes. These have plenty of surface rust, but no holes in them. This is a long bed truck, and this is where the back of the cab meets the bed. So this would be the gap here between the cab and the bed, and that's an area where a lot of debris can fall down, as has happened here. And look at how it gets trapped back behind your brake and fuel lines. Now again, anywhere that you can trap debris back behind metal and that stays moist like this area, that's an area you want to look for rust and corrosion. And if it rusts and corrodes through your fuel and brake lines, that could be a real safety hazard. So check this really close on your potential project. Here on the front, these grills, they're really fragile, especially now that they're getting a little bit older, and you'll often see that they're cracked. No big deal. They offer these pieces in the aftermarket, so very easy to replace those sort of things. Here you'll often see rocks or BB gun holes in lights if they've sat somewhere for a while. Here we are under the hood, obviously, and let's look back there along that cowl. You see how you've got quite the collection of debris. This one must have sat underneath some trees for a while. Boy, I tell you, that stuff there will collect water and cause rot and corrosion on that cowl panel. So especially look inside of those louvers there, look underneath there real close for rust before you get a project, because if that area rusts and the top of the firewall underneath there, you're in for some serious repair work on that vehicle. Right along this body seam right there where the cowl panel comes down to the firewall, See, I'm tracing it along. Can't really reach it, but this line right through there, you see there's some rust peeking out right there. There's a little bit of rust starting right there. Look at that area really closely and follow it along, and you'll oftentimes see, because remember, all that trash up there will fall down into those nooks and crannies back behind those two panels. And anywhere you got two panels coming together that can get moisture and trash and debris collecting, it's going to cause that corrosion, and we're starting to see it on this truck. Right back in here is an area that a lot of trash can go. You can see how some is sitting back in there. Looking even up at the hood. The hood has an inner and an outer skin, and that inner and outer skin are going to come together, and there's areas where this inner and outer skin, see there's a little weep hole right there. Those weep holes will get clogged up with dirt and debris, trapping moisture and debris in here, and that'll cause rust from the inside out. This one doesn't have that, but you'll look on the outside here, outside front of the hood, and also on the inside skin of the hood for those sorts of things all the way along. One more area I want to point out that you want to look at on these old square bodies is right through here on the hood, right forward of where the hood hinge mounts up. What happens is that these hood hinges over time, especially if they've been neglected from lubrication standpoint, they'll get kind of gummy and or sticky, and it'll make it really hard to pull the hood closed. And when it's really hard to pull that hood closed, it puts a lot of stress right through here on the hood, and it'll actually taco or bend the hood. And so you can walk up to a hood sometimes that's closed and see that it kind of comes up and has like a hump shape in it right here. This one doesn't have that problem, but look right through this area really closely for cracks where that hood hinge mounts up to the hood, and also for this outer hood edge to be folded, and then of course this to be bent in this area. Watch out for that. One of the most important areas to look is over underneath the battery in a project car or truck. That battery will leak acid over time, and that acid will leak down underneath and oftentimes rot out the tray and continue to drip down, sometimes down on this core support or the front of the fender liners, and cause them to rust away. This one's just beginning. You see all that corrosion that's just beginning to occur? A lot of debris collects in there. You can see the bottom of this brake booster's got a little bit of rust on that. Maybe an area, see some debris collecting on that. Maybe an area you want to look at for rust and corrosion as well. Just like any old car that sits somewhere for a while, if you leave it alone, rodents or other critters will find their way into it, and they'll start making nests. So want to watch out for those areas especially. Look at all the wiring that runs through those areas, because for some reason those critters love to chew on wires. If you guys know why that is, go ahead and leave a comment down below. When you're looking at your project car, you're looking around, want to make sure that there's no wetness indicating leaks. Here on the front of this rag joint of the steering column, we can see that that's got a lot of moisture, a lot of oiliness to it. Now we can't tell right now if that's dripping out of our power steering, which is held on by this fastener here, or some leakage from the front of the steering gearbox. Further looking for leaks, we can look at the bottom of these valve covers and look for any oil that might be seeping out of those and running down the side of the engine. This one doesn't appear to be too bad from up here. Maybe a little bit of moisture down in between those exhaust manifolds. Obviously the top end of this motor has seen some oil leaks, a little bit of rodent collection there under and around the carburetor. Again, we're looking at those wires. Want to make sure that the rodent, while he was there making his nest, didn't start chewing. Under the vehicle, you want to make sure that you check the frame for any serious rust or corrosion. You know, some of the surface rust, no big deal, but you just want to make sure that it's not starting to rust through anywhere. I did notice that these cab mounting bolts look to be pretty messed up. So those might be some things to keep in mind and look for as you're evaluating your potential project truck. That's going to allow the cab to sort of bounce. If it's not secured to the frame very well, it could allow the cab to kind of bounce off of the frame. Another area on the frame that we want to look at real close is right in here where our steering gearbox bolts up to that frame. Because these trucks are very heavy, turning the front end on these things causes a lot of stress between that gearbox and the frame. So where that bolts through, you want to look in that area for any cracks to this frame. One of the things you can do to test that as well is to try to turn the wheel and look for movement in that frame. Let me see if I can do that here and keep you on the subject. So I'm going to turn the wheel, and what you're looking for is in front of and behind of that steering gearbox to move independent of one another, indicating that there's a crack in the frame through there. This one doesn't have that. I'm going to take you underneath now. We're going to look on the back side of that area, and I'll show you where to look for cracks. And this is the back side where the Saginaw gearbox mates up to the frame. So this is the front frame horn. You can see these bolts that hold that gearbox to the other side of this. So you're looking for cracks all up through here, typically radiating from these bolt holes, sometimes all the way through. This is one mounting point for that, and then back behind this cross member, there's a couple of other bolts back there going through the frame and holding that gearbox in place. So again, check those areas for cracks and weak spots. While I was thinking about it, I wanted to bring up a couple of other places on the frame that you want to look for any kind of issues. Hey, Bagel. One of those is where the rear axle shock here mounts to the frame, this bolt right there. You want to check around that bolt and surrounding area and make sure there's no cracks on the frame. That's a high stress point, as you can imagine. Here we are on the back side of the rear wheels. You can see the spring perch. I want to make sure that these connections here, these spring perches are nice and solid. There's no rust through on the frame and where these connect up, because that again is a high stress area. I just wanted to show you though the back of the bumper, the rear bumper. This is an area back here where that rear wheel throws a lot of debris, mud, whatever up into this area, and as you can see here, that mud will cake on and cause a lot of rust. And so this is why the bumpers almost always on these old trucks rust out from the backside going forward, and you'll see that when you go to the front side of the bumper as a rust through spot underneath the chrome. Let's go inside now and take a look at some of the things that you're going to find on these old square bodies. One of the things is that a lot of the switches and handles are going to be loose and broken. They may or may not work. Seats are going to be torn up, so plan on having to repair that. Maybe some collections. Watch out for those rodents back behind the seats. Dashboard, almost always the dashboard is going to be cracked and torn up, but again, no big deal. The aftermarket supports these very well, and you can get all of these parts, replacement parts, very easily. And there she is, the square body dashboard. Boy, they've looked like this ever since the beginning. So this one's got your battery output. You can check, make sure your alternator is charging, oil pressure, water temperature, and this one even has a working clock. You'll see that little second hand spinning around, and you can hear when you open the door and it's quiet out, you can actually hear that thing running. It's like a wow, 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 wow little noise it'll be making. It might make you think something's on underneath the dash. Well, something is. It's often that little clock. If it's working, you'll hear it whirring away. This guy's got 68,252 miles, maybe 168, because you don't know it. It could be 168, might be 268. It doesn't give you that other number back over here to tell you how many hundreds of thousands of miles are on the vehicle. This truck has two gas tanks, one on either side. So there's a switch here. These vents are always going to be questionable whether or not they work very well. So let's go ahead and start this thing and see how she runs. All right, so we started it up. Looking over here, got oil pressure. Runs a little rough. Alternator appears to be putting out juice at 13 volts or so. Temperature, of course, isn't high yet, but we want to watch that temperature gauge and make sure it goes up there somewhere in the middle and stays there. You don't want that temperature gauge to keep creeping up towards that higher end, or else there may be a problem with the cooling system. I want to put her through a couple of gears, put her in reverse. Okay, neutral. I'm holding my foot on the brake here. Drive. Everything seems to engage well. No loud clunks or anything like that. All right, she'll be good to take for a test drive. The brakes work and it goes through the gears. Got Bagel McGee along with us for her test drive. He looks a little spooked, so let's see how she does. All right, here we go. So just like on the other video that I put out about taking a car out for the test drive for the first time, you want to make sure that you start out really slowly and work your way up to a more moderate or higher speed and load on the vehicle. Let's see about these window switches real quick. Oh yeah, it works, but just barely. I think I can. Before I take it for a ride here, I'm just noticing that the steering column has quite a bit of play in it. Not sure if that's a bearing or a tilt wheel issue, but that's something to watch out for. Cruising along nice and slow here. Go ahead and test the brakes. Stopping. Throttle seems to respond well, so the carburetor must be in decent working order. And I hear a lot of squeaks going over bumps, and so there's probably some worn out suspension components here. It's to be expected. I mean, this truck is getting older. As we take off, we can hear a lot of noise coming from that engine bay. Likely some exhaust leaks. Could be gaskets at the exhaust manifold, could be between some of the exhaust pipes. Been driving for a minute, and we can see now that our temperature gauge has come up to the middle and is staying there. It's a good sign. What do you think, Bagel? Is this one pretty good? He seems to be happy. I think he's pretty content. It's doing well. Let's go underneath the truck now and see what kind of issues we might be having to deal with on this project. We can see right off that the transmission pan is coated in oil. Now we can't tell if that's oil from the transmission or oil that has slung back off of the engine, because the oil pan also is covered in oil. So one good thing about oil leaking out of a vehicle is it sprays back underneath the vehicle over time, and it sort of acts as a rust preventative. So if there is a silver lining, that would be it. Let's go under the front of the vehicle now and look at the front and see if we see anything concerning. So it's been sitting here for a minute, and I see a bit of a puddle starting to form. And if we look down here on this cross member under the engine, there's a a bit of some weepage of something. And let's see what that is. Antifreeze. So we're going to have to look up under the engine and see where that's getting out. Also, here on the front of the frame, underneath the radiator, we see another antifreeze leak. So maybe it's got some multiple areas that we need to address. Also, while we're under here, we can see another bit of a leak here on the bottom of this power steering hose. And that does look like power steering fluid, so that'll be something to address as well. And don't be surprised if you find that the rear end has some oil or grease leaking. This pinion seal right in here oftentimes leaks, as this one does, and you'll see it wet from the front towards the back. And then on the very bottom of it, sometimes you'll see a leak there, and I'll go around back and show you that. Right here along the bottom of the rear axle, this cover here, the seal around it oftentimes will get worn out, and you'll see grease leaking out of here. Now, if you notice here, there's some orange RTV. That's an indicator that somebody's had this panel off before, likely to change the gear oil, maybe even to service some gears or something inside of there. So that's just something to look out for. Another thing we noticed on our test drive was a little bit of vibration when we got on the accelerator. These long bed trucks have a carrier bearing here on the drive shaft coming out of the transmission, coming back, and it connects to a secondary drive shaft, which goes all the way back here to our rear end. But that carrier bearing right there in the middle is supposed to keep it from wobbling around. Over time, these things will get worn out. And this one's got a lot of give and play in it. Probably part of the reason why you get some vibration going down the road. Test drive is going to give you a lot of indications of what to look for when you crawl under the vehicle. While we were driving this one, we heard a lot of squeaking going over bumps, and so it told us, hey, let's look at the suspension on this thing. And sure enough, this one's pretty ancient, probably original. We've got some worn out shocks, some worn out bushings, some worn out ball joints, no doubt. But it looks like the brakes have been redone, or at least serviced in the past. The test drive told us that there was some issues with the suspension, and we can see here this lower ball joint. You can kind of see in and through there, looking a little shiny. Might be worn out. You can always jack up the vehicle and wiggle the tire wheel back and forth, up and down at the 12 and 6 o'clock position. And if there's any play in these ball joints, you'll feel it that way, and that'll give you an indicator that those are perished. Thank you guys for your attention. I know it's a really long video, but there was a lot to go over, especially when you're looking to make this big of an investment. It's important that you go into it eyes wide open and know what you're going to have to deal with once you get into that project. Now guys, I hope that you find this to be the most definitive square body evaluation video ever. I've tried my best to point out all the things I could think of that might be problem areas you want to look at before you choose your project truck. But I'm sure that I've missed a few things. So if you saw something that I missed, you think the community needs to know about, put it down in the comments and we'd appreciate seeing that. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Subscribing is super important. As I said, it's not going to send you a bunch of spam. What it does is it helps YouTube know that you guys like the stuff that we're putting out and allows more people to find it. I really hope that you guys found this to be highly valuable information. If there's another vehicle that you'd like to see another similar in-depth evaluation of, leave me a comment down below and I'll try my best to find one, because I want this to be enjoyable as a hobby for us, and I want to be able to save you guys a whole lot of headache and a whole lot of money. Bagel, Mrs. C, and I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Please leave us some comments. Like, subscribe, especially subscribe. It really helps us to reach a greater audience. And we'd love to see you back Check out some of my other videos. Y'all have a wonderful day, and God bless.